Klobuchar?
Let Senator Padilla, who's been gallantly going back and forth between our two hearings, he can go first. I'll go next.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Catch your breath. This was in some ways a continuation of the Rules Committee hearing happening today as well. For 6 years, as this committee has heard me say time and again, I had the honor of serving as California's Secretary of State. And at that time, we were able to drive the success of 3 elections, including in 2020, when we ensured that more Californians participated in the electoral process than they ever had before. Record registration, record turnout, smooth, safe, accessible election. Now, that work would not have been possible without the extraordinary efforts of not just state elections, professionals and volunteers, but so many at the local level as well. Successful elections only happen because of the dedicated, hardworking, patriotic staff that are willing to go above and beyond to ensure that Americans could participate in the political process. But as the testimony here today has so credibly highlighted, our election workers now face extraordinary threats and harassment just for doing the most basic, essential work of our democracy, helping people cast their ballot. I'm grateful that they continue to show up for work despite these additional hardships, but I'm also extremely concerned that unless we address this problem head on, not ignore it, not sweep it under the rug, unless we address it head on, fewer and fewer people will choose to serve as election workers. So my first question is for the 2 secretaries of state, my former colleagues, Secretary Benson, Secretary Oliver. Can you expand on how the ordinary work of our election workers is so extraordinarily important to our democratic process and how the recent rise in threats is affecting recruitment and retention of workers?
Thank you, Senator Padilla, my former colleague and friend. Appreciate the question. I don't think folks realize how much goes into planning and executing an election and how many individuals. What I like to emphasize is the fact that we have a citizen-run democracy in the United States. And although this is my profession and my colleagues' profession, the people on the ground on Election Day during early voting, checking off and processing absentee ballots, those are volunteers. Those are individuals. Those are friends and family of both political parties, of all political parties and no political party, from around our communities and in our communities. These are the individuals who come back year after year, who believe it's their civic duty. Without them, we simply do not have a democracy, and we won't have a democratic process. And to the points that have been made here today so eloquently by my colleagues, we are on the verge of not having that process anymore because we are not going to have enough committed citizen individuals if these threats and the big lie that is driving them continues.
And I'll just add to that, the other side of this, in Michigan, we just held a primary election yesterday, and I went around and thanked election workers throughout the day. And what I actually saw was another piece of the story, which is at the same time, while these threats are real and the loss of so much institutional history is real, we're also seeing a number of individuals, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, well-intentioned citizens standing up to say, I want to serve. We're seeing individuals, in fact, 6,000 individuals in Michigan signed up to serve as new election workers in yesterday's election. And so I have a lot of hope, actually, that through this moment, if citizens observe these challenges and simply seek out the truth and step up with us to serve and protect our democracy, we can actually emerge from this moment with a stronger, healthier, more robust democracy than ever before. But that ultimately will be determined by the citizens of our country itself, who will determine whether to stand with us in this moment in furtherance of the truth in our democracy or not.
And to be abundantly clear, there's a problem that I laid out, a danger, a threat. Does it hurt Democratic voters, Republican voters, all voters?
In fact, Senator, the recent situation in Otero County, New Mexico, not only did the big lie push the county commission in that county so far as to actually take an initial vote to not certify the election process, it would have disenfranchised 7,300 voters in that county, the vast majority of whom are Republicans. All of the candidates, with maybe 2 exceptions on the ballot, that would have been disqualified from the general election would have been Republican candidates. So we're fighting to save the vote for every voter, regardless of party.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, I want to ask one more question that ties the discussion happening in Rules Committee and the need to reform the Electoral Count Act to this topic here in Judiciary Committee. You know, in discussing the increasing threats that election workers face simply for doing their jobs, I think it's important that we understand why we're facing these threats in the first place. Because to this day, nearly 2 full years after the November 2020 election, people who should know better continue to spread lies and disinformation about the election. They continue to claim, without any shred of evidence, that there was massive fraud and irregularities in the ballot counts. There wasn't. They continue to refuse to acknowledge that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. He did. So these lies aren't just innocuous political rhetoric. They're dangerous statements that have the effect of riling people up, undermining faith in our democracy, and putting real people, from election workers to candidates for office, in harm's way. And I'm not even talking about the deadly insurrection that took place here in the nation's capital. So my final question, Secretary Benson, I think you are perfect to respond here. Can you walk the committee through the link between the big lie and the increase in election threats that we've seen since the 2020 election?
Yes, I think we have to recognize that while we've talked a lot today about challenges, threats facing public officials generally, there's a particular nuance here. It's critically important that those attacking us are motivated by lies and misinformation that they have been told by people they trust. In fact, I mean, there are members of the U.S. Senate, some of whom are on this committee, who knowingly spread falsehoods about the security of our elections with zero evidence, factual basis. And, you know, today I hope they hear me when I say that in doing so, they are hurting us. They are hurting our democracy. We are professional election administrators. We work every day to ensure that every voter, regardless of where they live or who they vote for, can participate in choosing their leaders and holding them accountable. And when many of those leaders then turn around and spread or amplify conspiracy theories about the security or accuracy of our elections that have been proven false by multiple sources, they then put our lives in danger. They put the lives of our kids and our loved ones in danger. So I hope that members of this body and others hear that from us today, and they put an end to it, because that is what is going to happen in order for ultimately these threats to stop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Padilla. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.